welcome to something new. This is the Fantasy GP Takeover, a new series in which before every Grand Prix I'm going to get a special guest on to take over my Fantasy GP account, rejig my team and predict the weekend as they see fit. Today's very special guest for the very first episode is the brilliant Dre Harrison from Motorsport 101. Good morning, Dre.
Morning, thanks for having me on. I heard that Tomo was unavailable, so unfortunately you're stuck with me instead. I'm Dre Harrison. You may know me from the Motorsport 101 podcast. Back in the day, it was YouTube when I was Harrison 101. You might remember me from those days as well. But I'm honoured. I get to be the first guest, so I get to put Stu's team in the crapper before he's even started. So if you're playing any leagues against him, you can thank me if he has a bad score.
Believe me, I will do. This is completely out of my hands now. No responsibility anymore. If anyone's unfamiliar with Motorsport 101, do you want to give a little quick summary of what you and the team do over there? It's a whole mix of things, isn't it?
Oh yeah, God, it is a whole mix of motorsport content. We do videos, we do podcasts, we do written pieces, Formula One, MotoGP. So if you're into your two-wheeled action as well, we do a lot of that. IndyCar, bit of Formula E we've dabbled into as well. We talk a bit about sports cars for the big ones, like Le Mans, for example, as well. So if you're just generally into a lot of motorsport series and you want an alternative opinion where we curse and crack jokes and generally have good banter and all of that good stuff, check us out if you haven't already. Motorsport101.com is the website. There's a whole heap of content on there. Like I said, podcasts, videos, you name it. We've probably done it at some point or another. So check it out if you haven't already.
Excellently plugged. It is really good content. I would recommend it, whether you go into the podcast, or the blogs over there. Your hashtag #AskDre blogs are always very interesting and candid.
Thank you, man.
Actually, I mean, the reason I kind of wanted you to get on, partly, I wanted to have an excuse to chat with you for quite a while, really. I did go on your podcast, but it was the week that you weren't there, so missed out on that.
Yeah. I remember that Formula E in London, quite right, yeah. It's the 1 week I was stuck with day job commitments, but yes, we did miss that, but hey, we get to make up for lost time here, so why not, right?
Absolutely. And you know what? I've always found you very thoughtful, whether you're just pondering away on Twitter or writing on your blog or chatting. So I thought you a great shout to kick things off today. Before we get into it, just what have you made of the preseason so far anyway? We've had, brand new spec cars and 6 days of very mixed testing. How have you found it?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, like I've always said, testing is a glorified crapshoot. And that's how it goes year on year anyway. And you never really know. There's so many variables in Formula One as it is. And this one's been probably even more so because we've got a brand new set of cars, a brand new set of regulations, a bunch of drivers in places that we wouldn't expect going through last year. So there's a whole heap of question marks going into this season. But I've always said, I guess that's part of the fun. I mean, it wouldn't be F1 if it wasn't for some general not quite knowing what to do with ourselves logic. That's a good thing because I mean, this is a sport of dominance. This is a sport of best car tends to win. So if we don't know that going in, I can only see that as a good thing. So I am more than ready to embrace me not knowing a lot about the season going in, compared to most seasons where you've probably got a pretty good idea before you've even started of how the field's going to play out. And I'm sure we'll get into that as we make our picks. But I've got a pretty meh idea on the field. And I can't wait for my theory to be blown out of the water once we start picking.
Yeah, I think motorsport fans in general, I think we've been waiting for something to shake things up. Being the first person to pick a Fantasy Grand Prix team, that's where it all kind of falls apart. Okay, so before we get into the pick-making thing, let's sort of set the scene up a bit going into Bahrain. We're recording this on the Monday, so if anything chaotic happens in the next few days between now and this video coming out, like the Mercedes factory explodes or something, that we didn't take that into account. I thought a good way of setting things up and getting some, opinions from you would be viewer correspondence, old school. Ooh. Send in your emails. I ask people to write in.
My favourite.
Chainbear@gmail.com, questions or comments for the both of us. I thought I'd start with a question that has quite a lot of people divided. Bradley wrote in, my question as we head into the race weekend is, do you think Mercedes is bluffing about their lack of performance again, or are they really on the back foot into this season? I've seen mixed opinions on this. A lot of people are doing the doubt meme, as Mercedes often downplay their things. But actually, they do seem like they were throwing a lot at the car in the last couple of days and not getting a lot back for it. What do you think on this?
I mean, it's very easy to take these sorts of comments with a pinch of salt. I love Lewis Hamilton as much as the next guy, but he often has a knack of playing down his own hand, whether it be by accident or on purpose. They are the first people to, slow roll it, and then when they win, it's like, look, we won, and everyone's just like, but we thought you were going to be crap. I could see how that would irk some people. So I think it's very easy to just go, he's bluffing. Look, it's Mercedes. I think a lot of people underestimate just how good Mercedes are at developing their car over the course of a season. I think that played a huge role into last year. The way that Hamilton's talking, I believe he's being sincere. I think there are genuine issues with that Mercedes W13 this year. I've seen a lot of other journos back this opinion up. It's generally, if you look at the eye test, and I know that's not an exact science by any stretch of the imagination, it doesn't look great out there. A lot of porpoising that's been talked about, a lot of just generally not looking like a very comfortable car to drive, and that's always a bit of a raised eyebrow emoji as to how to look at the situation. I think there could be a situation a lot like last year, only without the wins. Like, a lot of people saw it last year where Merc spun a lot in testing. We all thought, well, Mercs are playing it down, and then they won 3 out of the first 4, and everyone was like, they fixed the problems. Turns out they hadn't. So I'm not 100% sure on this one, but it wouldn't surprise me if Mercs struggled a bit to begin with, but then got better as the year went on, because they're very, very good at developing in-house.
So maybe we'll see, as you're covering Bahrain, maybe you won't go full on in the Merc straight away, but don't write them off for the rest of the season.
Yeah, not at all.
This question more of a what you'd like rather than what would you think. But this from Oscar. We know that Mercedes, Ferrari, and Red Bull will probably end up in the top 5 this year, and expect them to perform as such in the first race. But what backmarker team or driver would you like to see in the top 5 of the first race? Perhaps a Haas driver with a new and improved lineup, or someone like Bottas or Albon for redemption?
If I was being complete fanboy, given that most people know me as the internet Sebastian Vettel fan, I'd be doing him a disservice if I didn't say him, because Aston Martin, I said it during the podcast last year, I thought they were the biggest disappointments in the field. I think given where they were a top 4 team in their final year as Racing Point, and then they were probably the worst of the midfield teams last year, was not ideal. I would love to see Sebastian Vettel back in the top 5 where I think he belongs. I mean, would it be crazy for me to say Mick Schumacher? I'd like to see Mick Schumacher back up there. Haas, I think, might be the real deal. I genuinely think that, Haas looked pretty solid in testing in terms of raw pace once they were able to catch up a little bit in terms of, obviously they got a little bit of extra time because their freights got delayed and whatnot. I guess if you want to go from an outside F1 standpoint, the stain of Mazepin has gone. So that might turn some people around on Haas again. Mick Schumacher's always been well liked, and look, I grew up a huge Schumacher fan, so I'd be lying to myself if I didn't say I would like Mick to do well. And for the 230 or so Haas employees that have not had an easy time of it in F1 for a while, I think it would be another great feel-good moment if they could get one of their cars solidly in the points again. That would be a real good sign. So fingers crossed for them as well, I would say.
To be honest, absolutely agree with you. I know past few years. There have been some top-level decisions from Haas that have made us, well, at minimum, cringe a bit.
Yes.
But actually, there is a whole team there, and I would like them to just put a lot of things behind them and actually move on. And they do look pretty solid. I know they did more glory runs than some of the other teams, but yeah, I think that's a good shout. I'd love to see Williams. I don't think it's going to happen this year, but I think I'd love to see them at some point establish themselves as someone who can move up and not be stuck among the back.
Yeah. Alex Albon was dealt a very bad hand at Red Bull. I will take this to my grave that Alex Albon was, I think, almost set up to fail in that Red Bull setup, given he was given a top-tier seat after 12 career starts and was like, here, your opponent is now Max Verstappen, arguably the best driver in the world. I mean, it's a situation that would have failed 95% of drivers in F1 history. So I would like to see Albon get a foothold in with a proper team. It's easy to forget just how underexperienced he is compared to a lot of guys in the field. And, you know, like, it's Williams. They belong at the front. Like, let's be honest with each other here, you know. So, like, I would like to see, Albon back up there as well. If Williams got in the points, I'd be very happy with that too.
Absolutely agree. Let's move on to a question about Daniel Ricciardo from the Terse Verse, who asks, why is it that Daniel Ricciardo is automatically assumed as being washed and that nobody thinks he'll match Lando, let alone beat him? His caliber is beyond question, and he's literally only had one bad season by his standards.
I'm in full agreement. Look, I think. Well, Lando Norris is extremely popular. There's no getting around that. I think a lot of people are pulling for him to do well. Norris was superb last year, by all accounts. I think he was a real driver of the year candidate through the first half of 2021. Dropped off a little bit in the second half, but still an overall really good season. That McLaren had a reputation of being, quite difficult to drive. And Norris had already had 2 years of experience in that system, and that's all he'd ever known in Formula One. So, again, I think Ricciardo was a little bit doomed to fail last year. Look, the year before when he was at Renault, Ricciardo was superb. Like, he was fifth in the championship. Mm-hmm. He had got the multiple podiums that year. I think it was the first time Renault had been on the podium for a good decade as a factory team. Like, I don't think people clocked in 2020 just how good Ricciardo was. I think a bit of that was because of the braking issue and their car being a bit illegal. So I think maybe we got a bit cynical about Ricciardo, but the man is a quality driver. Like, you don't get to, double-digit wins in or near double-digit wins in this sport without being really, really good in some capacity. So I absolutely think that Ricciardo has been maybe we've dropped a bit of faith in him a bit too quickly. I think the way sports and sports takes go, we look at short-term answers to long-term problems. Mm-hmm. And I think with, Ricciardo losing out quite heavily to Norris last year, I think the guys that were more cynical about Ricciardo is going to pipe up a bit more. But the man's a quality driver. I mean, again, as a Sebastian Vettel fan, I will tell you firsthand, Ricciardo was really, really good in Red Bull. And, he split seasons with Verstappen when they were together as teammates. He's on as good a level as almost anyone in the field when he's dialed in. So I think Ricciardo is a quality driver, and I think people have written him off a bit quick as far as I'm concerned. Talk to me at the end of the season, and then we'll see what happens.
Fair enough. And you're absolutely right about the short-termism of the way people view the sport. And I think you, of all people, know all too well about how quickly the value of Sebastian Vettel dropped in a lot of people's minds, unfairly so.
Yeah, very quickly.
He's still very much a quality driver. 4 championships, don't forget. It's sort of from 2 people here. One from one, which is how much you think we can read into this season's performance and competitive purely from this opening race weekend in Bahrain. And Jack, on a similar note, says, by what round do you believe we will have seen a representative pecking order? His rule used to be Monaco, because by that point you had the full variety of tracks. So yeah, what do you think about that? Do you think Bahrain is going to give us a clear insight, or do you think it'd be...
Well, Bahrain's a night race. Temperatures are going to be a bit all over the place. I've always said it's a bit like MotoGP in Qatar we had last week, where Qatar's not really like a normal MotoGP race because it's a night race. The temperatures are different. It's the first race, so people always take, again, they go for short-term hot takes, where they're not thinking maybe of the overall bigger picture. I think that's a good shout. I think Monaco is normally good. I've often always said Europe, by the time you get to the European rounds, you tend to get a better idea of where we're at. I can't maybe say that this time because Imola, I believe, is round 3 this year, so that might be a little bit early. And Imola is also quite a challenging track because of how narrow it is and how hard it is to normally pass people. So again, it could be a qualifying sort of round where, whoever's at the front will probably win. I'd say there's a good chance of that happening. I think that's a good shout. I think Monaco 5 or 6 rounds deep. I think Monaco's round 7 this year. So again, by that point, you'll have had 6 races. You'll have a good variety of, faster, more open tracks like Bahrain and then tracks like Imola that are a bit more technical. I think that's a good shout. I mean, we'll get to the picks in a minute. I have a couple of theories on this, but I think it's going to be quite hard to tell especially for the midfield this year. I think I've got a good idea on the top 3, but the midfield, I think it could be open season. I really don't know on this one so much. And I think that is fascinating, personally. Because, I mean, look, if you look at Bahrain last year, Yuki Tsunoda was fantastic. So much so that Ross Brawn thought, he's the best rookie we've seen in F1 in years, and then it just didn't work out that way. Yeah. So, it's you've got to pump the brakes a little bit at round 1, and, ease your way in is the best advice I can always tell people. Like, give it 4 or 5 rounds, and then we'll really start talking about the state of play in the field.
And of course, I think what we might see is a little bit of going backward forward on who's on top, depending on whether we got the fast corners, which favour people who've got that ground effect really working, and then we've seen that these cars are actually struggling a lot in the slow corners. So maybe the teams that have figured out how to get these cars. I mean, I can't imagine what these cars are going to be around Monaco because they are complaining a lot whenever they get to a slow corner. So, we shall see. Okay, so the main reason I got you here is to do my fantasy GP picks.
Boy.
So maybe you guys at home haven't played this. I play the non-official fantasy GP thing. It's fantasygp.com. It's not sponsored by them or anything. It's just the one I've always played. My league code is on the screen, or it will be when if you want to come join the league and try and beat Dre and anyone else who takes over. Just to explain, points-wise, you'll get to pick some drivers and teams. They'll all get the points that they get in the race, but the drivers will also get 3 points for every position they make up in the race. So if they start 20th, finish 10th, they'll get 30 points for that. Teams it's the same, but it's just 1 point per position gained. And you'll also get some points for qualifying and for predicting how the race is going to go. Okay, well, let's start by looking at the values that the Fantasy GP site has given, which I think are already going to be controversial. I think you could get some nice picks. I've sort of got. You can see my screen now, can't you?
Yeah, I can indeed.
So I could fit 9 on screen. I don't know if it's easy for you to look at that.
That works too. That's absolutely fine. Yeah.
As a thing. So we got, driver wise, they've put Verstappen at the top, just a shade more expensive than Hamilton. You're going to have $80 million to play with, by the way, for 3 drivers and 3 teams. I think, I don't know. Well, I'll turn to you. What stands out as sort of perhaps a little bit out of place or a good bargain to you?
I mean, what leaps off the page to me, I'm glad that Fantasy GP took the bold option of putting Verstappen and Hamilton as way more expensive than everybody else, and they should do, because they had, I think, something like 80% of the 1-2 finishes last season. So they are almost, like last year at least, they were almost guaranteed top 2 finishes every race. So if you want a banker, i.e. a banker car or a banker driver, you are going to have to spend big money. So I'm glad. It's a bit like when it comes to fantasy football, for example, when you pick Harry Kane or Mo Salah. You have to, if you want a near guaranteed scorer, you're going to have to take a good chunk of your budget out to do it. So I'm glad that's happened. George Russell, I think, is going to be radioactive at 17.5 million. We have no idea how good he's going to be. Anyone who says they do is lying to themselves. His career to date is such a crapshoot, given that he's had generally not the best opposition, and he's been in a car that's been semi-competitive at best in his F1 career so far. So honestly, it would not surprise me if no one picked George Russell. I mean, at that price, I think they should have gone a bit lower to tempt some people in, because Sainz and Leclerc are really good at Ferrari, and I think maybe some of that Ferrari hype in preseason testing's probably bumped them up a bit. On the other end of the scale, if Haas are half of what we think they are, or what they could be, if you're shining on the bright side of what Haas could be, they're going to be a great bargain pickup for anyone that might have gambled on taking what I would like to say is two bankers, i.e. you've spent maybe a third to nearly half your budget on, at least, I think you could only realistically afford one of either Verstappen, Hamilton, Merc, or Red Bull as a driver or a car, because you've got 80 million to play with and whatnot. So I mean, if you're taking minimum, you're talking 48 mil if you're taking two bankers. So if you want a stocking filler, as I like to say, by taking maybe Kevin Magnussen at 2 mil or Mick Schumacher at 3.5 to fill out your roster, and you can be a bit more aggressive on the top end of the billing, I think that could be a good value pick, or as a way to go on that one, because you're going to be thinking, if you're building this team, you're going to be thinking about taking at least one of those big four options, most certainly.
Absolutely agree. And if you go big on your drivers and your teams, that's a huge chunk of your budget gone. So,
yeah,
I agree with you. Haas there is will probably be a good pick. Let's see what you're going to do. I'm going to go to the teams page where we've got our nice. So you've got three drivers and three teams to pick. It's all up to you how you want to spread the wealth. We could play around a bit. We'll start with your first driver. You're going to start at the very top.
I'm going to start at the very top. I'd like you to put in Max Verstappen.
I think that's a very good shout.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had 18 top 2 finishes last year. There's no getting around it. He had as consistent a season as I've ever seen in F1 last year. And the 4 times he wasn't in the top 2, you could make an argument there was mitigating factors behind all of them, i.e. Monza, i.e. Silverstone, i.e. Hungary and the Bottas bowling ball, etc. Yeah. So, every other round, he was in the top 2. I mean, if you want guaranteed 18 points out of your number 1 position, at least, I would argue Verstappen, especially given the quality arguments about car. I think you got to take Max. I think it's a bit safer than Hamilton. I don't think there's enough of a difference at $500,000 for me to go Hamilton just to save ultra pennies on it. I think in terms of consistency, I'd probably take Max right now. So I'd say Verstappen for my number 1 driver pick.
I think that's a good pick. Yeah, and there are definitely more question marks over Hamilton at the moment. Again, could be full of sandbags like some people are predicting, but yeah, I think that's a good solid shout. Okay, so your second driver, are you going to sort of you going to go middle of the pack, or what's the?
I'm going to go middle of the pack here. Look, I'll let you in on a little spoiler. There's 2 banker picks in this team. I've been aggressive here on this, so I've got to skimp elsewhere. So for second driver, I'm going to go Lance Stroll.
Ooh, interesting. So I'm going to find him in the pack here. 7.5 million.
Yeah, I've gone Lance Stroll, and the reason why is that head-to-head against Sebastian Vettel last year, he was actually better in race trim. I think it was something like 13-7 head-to-head in races they both finished last year. Stroll was definitely stronger in the races than Sebastian Vettel was. He's not the best qualifier in the world, but that might actually be a good thing in the context of this format, because he's more likely to gain positions in a race, and you do get points for that. So I think Stroll is actually quite a decent midfield pick here on this one. I think he's a guy that could end up very quietly maybe going from 13th to 9th in a race, and that could get you some decent points here and there. So I've gone Lance Stroll for my second driver on this one.
Okay, I feel you on that. You got 47.5 million left for your last four. Let's pick your last driver.
I'm going to go AlphaTauri and I'm going to go Pierre Gasly.
Oh, yeah, that's a nice shout. Always worth a shout in your team.
Yeah, look, he's an alchemist, I like to call him, because nobody did more with nothing last year than Pierre Gasly did. He's been arguably the pick of the midfielders for the last 2 years in F1 now. Gasly, supreme qualifier last year. I think his average qualifying last year was something like 6.5, which is ridiculous, given he was in the sixth best car in the field in terms of constructors last year. So, Gasly single-handedly dragged AlphaTauri into top 5 contention, and when that car was dialed in, they were beating everybody in the midfield. On his day, he can beat McLaren, he can beat Ferrari, he could beat Alpine on a semi-regular basis if he liked the track, if he liked the setup, etc. So I think for a high upside, bit of a riskier pick, because I know AlphaTauri's always struggled a bit for budget and being a bit in Red Bull's shadow. But I think for a guy that can punch above his weight, qualify well, and maybe stay up there, I think Gasly's my way to go on this one.
Fully agree. Okay, so you've spent, as good as bang on half your budget so far on the 3 drivers. Now we've got to move on to teams. So you suggested you were going to go big on teams as well, perhaps. What's your first team pick?
Red Bull Racing.
So all in on Red Bull, top driver, top team.
Yeah, I've gone all in on Red Bull here. I was tempted to go Mercedes here, but remember, you're allowed changes after races. So, like I said, I think Mercs will be stronger down the road. I would consider changing to Mercs maybe down the stretch once they figure it out, because I think they will. I mean, look, I think Mercs are the best team in Formula 1, pound for pound. And I think that, they'll figure it out. They always do when it comes to Mercedes. But right now, at least early doors, and especially knowing you don't get charged for changes until round 2, this is a free weekend. Go with the best team you go with who you think the best team is on paper. And I think that's Red Bull right now. If they get 2 cars on the podium, your quid's in, as far as I'm concerned. So I think you've got to be aggressive here. I think some of the upper midfielders like Ferrari and McLaren are not the best in terms of value. So I would say go Red Bull on this one. I'm going to be aggressive on this one.
Okay, yeah, good pick like that. Okay, so you got just 15.5 million left for 2 more teams. Your second team is?
I'm going to go with Alpine.
Interesting, because there's a lot of question marks around exactly where they are. What are your thoughts?
This is a risky one. I openly admit this is a risky pick because they've been all over the place in testing. They seem to be a bit stronger towards the end. They got some good laps in on the final day. But you know what Fernando Alonso's like. Once he starts talking, he's very candid. And he said now that he's a bit more confident about them than what they were last week, because last week things were not looking great for him. They seem to have figured some of their reliability out, which is promising. Look, I really liked Alpine last year. I think they had a very good team dynamic. I think I think both their drivers were really solid, and I think as a good baseline car, I think Alpine is bang on average. And that's not necessarily an insult. It means that sometimes they'll punch above their weight and sometimes they won't. But of all the midfielders I have in terms of the budget that's left, it's a huge jump up to Ferrari and McLaren at 16 and 17 and a half respectively. So you either go in Alpine or you go in AlphaTauri. And AlphaTauri, I have too many question marks about Yuki Tsunoda. So I think Alpine is a safer pick at 11 mil compared to AlphaTauri at 10, personally.
All right. Yeah, interesting. But yeah, I understand. Not quite as safe and solid. But I appreciate the gamble. So you got $4.5 million left. Wouldn't that be a nice thing?
Can you guess here, folks? Folks at home, can you guess which team I've taken at the end here? I'll give you a hint. It's the only one I can afford, and it's Haas. Now, look, again, there is every chance we could be proven wrong here, and Haas are the worst team in the field. And you know what? I will happily accept that punishment if it comes down to it. But I've got Red Bull, so I can afford one dead spot, in my opinion. And I think, as an all-upside pick, take Haas. because if you can splurge a little bit in other areas here, and if Haas do punch above their weight from what testing times may or may not have suggested, given again it seems like they might have done some glory runs at the end, but if the pace is genuine from Haas, it's a free pick as far as I'm concerned. So if they do somehow get in the points, or they gain ground from a bad qualifying or something like that, you're playing with house money at that point. So I think it's a bit of I think it's an all upside pick. I'm prepared to basically say this is a 5-pick team, but if Haas somehow, or again if their form from testing is genuinely valid, I think that could be an awesome bonus pick. So I think for $3 million, you can take a punt on Haas and see what happens.
I fully agree. I mean, I'm with you. I'm even less speculative about it. I think Haas are not at all in the position they were last year. I think that they're definitely somewhere in the midfield. I think it's not out of question that by the end of the season we'll be talking about 5th or 6th maybe for them if they've actually got their stuff together. So for $3 million, that's perfect pick, I think.
Like I said, why not?
Yeah.
Why not? You got nothing to lose and potentially a lot to gain. They went all in on development for 2021 pretty much right from the start. So they've literally waited an entire year for this moment. So if their car is anything like they think it's going to be, or it looked like it could be in testing, I think it's worth a punt.
Yeah, fully agree. And then don't forget, if you haven't played this game yet, we can change these. The next person who comes along will be able to change these. The values may change between races depending on what we learn. So, you could be getting in early doors on this house. That could shoot up should they start to show potential. All right, I'm going to lock you in. This is your team. There we go.
Well, let's see how we go.
There is, of course, the second part of this, which is actually predicting things for the Bahrain Grand Prix. So you're going to need to pick your podium, first, second, and third, pole position, fastest lap, how many safety cars, of which virtual safety car counts as just one safety car, and a virtual safety car that turns into a normal safety car still counts as one. And the bonus question of where will Sebastian Vettel finish? And
of course.
Will the heart leave the head?
Oh, boy. Fun times. Okay, I'm going to go Verstappen, Hamilton, and I'm going to go for an outside pick. I'm going to say Charles Leclerc third.
Okay. Yeah, we didn't talk too much Ferrari, did we? But
no.
Potentially, they could be out on top.
I think they've got something here. Everybody and their mother has said in that paddock that Ferrari's got something here. Mm-hmm. Now, I joked about this on Twitter a couple of days ago where I said, give me your most creative reason as to how Ferrari will inevitably cock this up. Because that's almost what we know Ferrari for. They've got all the money, all the resources, all the talent you could possibly ask for. I've said before, I think it's the best lineup in F1 pound for pound, given I think Leclerc and Sainz are fantastic drivers.
Agreed.
I really do think they're excellent. But how do they screw this up? Because it's like Ferrari are like the catfish. You think they're going to do better than what they actually do in the end. But I do genuinely think they've got something this year. And I think Leclerc is so good. I really do. I think he's the sort of guy that will finish fourth in a Grand Prix and no one will notice. And he'll do that week after week. I think first week could be some dodgy stuff. There's always a bit more of a chance of funky stuff happening first race. It would not surprise me at all if George Russell or Sergio Perez is going to be third here, because I think that will be a lot of people's go-to third pick. I'm going to drift outside the box just a little bit and say Charles Leclerc here. Punching above his weight, because he's been doing that for a year and a half in that not great Ferrari lineup until last year. So I'm going to say Charles on this one.
Perfect. All right, let's ask. Pole position then on the Saturday. Raw pace. I'm tempted to say George Russell here, given how well he did in Sakir when he was at Merc a couple of years ago. I'm going to play it safe. I'm going to take Max Verstappen here. Mm-hmm. I think Verstappen has become a much better qualifier than he has been in previous years. I think he had 10 last year. Hamilton only had 4, I want to say, last year in terms of pole positions. I think it's something like that. Very surprisingly low, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure Lewis is quite the qualifier he's been in years past. There's been a couple of years recently where he's been down on pole positions. I think 2019 or 2020, he was kind of in the same boat. I think this is, again, relatively safe because I think Red Bull's got a stronger car, but I think Max is much improved over one lap. I'm going to say Verstappen on this one. Ooh.
Okay, yeah, I think that's wise enough. Fastest lap then, I think that has a lot more variables in it because you just never know if there's going to be a Sergio Perez who takes a second pit stop at the end of the race. And but
yeah, that's what I was thinking. Now, I was thinking that, generally speaking, top four has a big advantage on the field. They will often have a pit stop in hand. So, they'll take that pit stop for the fastest lap bonus. So that narrows it down to, I'd say, Russell and Perez. Given that I think Red Bull are a bit stronger, I'm going to say George Russell on this one.
So George Russell. So you imagine him falling in that gap where he's got a lot of space behind him. He's not going to lose anything by taking that extra. Cool.
Yeah, that's what I think.
And now here we go. How many safety cars? Bahrain, a lot of runoff. Well, yeah.
A lot of runoff. It would take a pretty big wreck for it to get a safety car, I reckon. But it is the first round of the season. They've not raced these cars at full chat. I'm going to say one.
Mm-hmm.
I think one is the safest pick here because I think there's bound to be a spin here somewhere. There's bound to maybe to be like a funky clash head to head with some racecraft. Maybe someone makes a driver error, give the new cars. I think one is probably the safest option here. I'm tempted to say zero, but I'm going to say one on this occasion.
I think seeing as virtual safety cars are included as a safety car, all you need is someone to knock a wing off or something with these low visibility cars as they get used to it to just need a marshal to come get it. Yeah, I think at least one sounds good. Yeah. And here we go. Maybe the question of the heart. So you got three options: top four, 5th to 8th, or 9th and below.
I think 8th might be generous. I'm not convinced on Aston Martin. I'm gonna look. It's the options have made this way easier for me. Let's put it to you that way, right? Top 4, don't see it. 5th to 8th, maybe on a good day. But given you've got over half the field to play with by going 9th or worse, a technical DNF, you win basically. So, for example, I'd say again, safest option, you take 9th or worse here. I think that's the way to go here. That's the value play.
Okay, perfect. I hope that wasn't too painful to say. Poor Vettel, he'll get there. All right, that is it. That is you locked in for Bahrain. Thank you very much for doing that for me. Hopefully you'll do me proud.
I'm not speaking from a position of confidence here, but I think we'll be okay. I think we'll be okay, Steve. I think we'll be all right. I promise. Maybe.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, thank you so much for coming on and doing this. If you want to catch more of Dre, go to motorsport101.com and
that's the one.
I'll put the links in the description as well, but you'll find all their socials and all the people on that team as well. Next week, I've got Deanna from Relapped on to take over the Saudi Arabian.
Love Deanna's work.
A lot of fun watching her reactions after a race. So that should be a lot of fun. If you want to get in touch for that, please email chainbear@gmail.com with Saudi Takeover in the subject line somewhere. If you want to hear what Deanna's thoughts on anything. Dre, thank you so much for coming on. It's a pleasure to talk to you at last. And
always a pleasure, my friend. Always a pleasure.
I'll catch you online. We'll be back with more Fantasy Grand Prix Takeover. Well, next week because the races come thick and fast now.
Oh yeah.
Cheers.
Take care, guys.